Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
What an unbelievable week. As I said, you just said to the players, this doesn't happen. Today doesn't happen without complete buy-in from the building. Listen, you guys have all reported about the changes and all that, and that's all well and good, but the buy-in and the execution, the preparation, I just told those guys, nothing substitutes good preparation. And we had just such a good practice week, but that's why we won this football game. We won the football game because all three phases had great weeks of preparation, and we went out and executed.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. Erin Summers here alongside John DeShazier. Really good to be talking to you after a win. The Saints getting the 2017 victory over the Atlanta Falcons. And man, it was a tough game. Came down to the very end once again against the Falcons, but the Saints delivered. They finished. And as we've heard from Coach Rizzy and the players over the past day or so, that was the goal all week is finishing and getting the win.
Yeah, Club Dub was closed for renovations for a few weeks, but now it's reopened post-game. So Saints had something to celebrate. They took care of the minute details that lead to winning a game. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't have the quarterback sacked, and it wasn't clean by any stretch of the imagination. Some of those penalties down the stretch, especially the ones on defense, kept the Falcons right into it, and those things have to be eliminated and cleaned up. And you know, Younghoe Koo had to miss 3 field goals, and one of them was blocked. But, you know, that obviously contributed. But the Saints didn't have any mistakes on special teams, and they didn't have any turnovers. And, you know, they played a fairly clean game offensively. And, you know, everything stalled a little bit in the second half. But the defense, which has wanted to redeem itself, got an opportunity to do it by being on the field at the end of the game and getting stops on the last drives of the game. So the things that the Saints wanted to do, some of them they were able to accomplish, and hopefully those are things that they can build off.
One of those plays at the very end was the Tyrann Mathieu interception, and he's somebody that's been hard on himself this past week. He said that he spoke to the defense and acknowledged that he didn't think he'd been playing up to his standard and needed to do more and do better. He posted on social media that this win was for his teammates and his coaches. That's what he made that play for. It's kind of cool to hear that in hindsight and then see that he was able to deliver. And I got to give him credit because it's hard to stand up in front of a group of people and admit your flaws.
Yeah, well, first, to Tyrann's credit, he didn't lie. He had not been playing very well. And that's part of the accountability that Darren Rizzy's been talking about for this team. Guys need to be accountable to themselves, to their teammates, to the organization. And really kind of, if you mix all of it up in a ball, it's kind of accountable to the fans because people have eyes. They see, and they see you're not playing to the standard that they're accustomed to seeing you play to. Now, Tyrann's standard is so high that holding him to that standard at his age and his production level and his years in the league probably isn't realistic. I mean, he's still the Honey Badger, but he's not the Honey Badger, 70 snaps a game. So when he's able to pull it out for those, however many snaps, he really can still be a very effective player, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, he's a guy who the football has always found Tyrann Mathieu. Going back to high school at St. Augustine, to LSU in college, to Arizona, to Kansas City, to wherever he has been playing football, the ball has always found him. Some of that is, I don't know, some of it's magic, and a lot of it's hard work. A lot of it's putting yourself in position and studying and knowing where to be.
Smart player, for
and
sure.
Understanding where to be in the defense. So, great thing for him to, one, stand up and say, hey, I hadn't been playing to my standard. I'll play better for you guys, and then to actually go out and back it up is something that young guys, I hope, will pay attention to and see, because I think it's one of those things, when Tyrann speaks, people listen.
He is definitely one of the leaders of this team. Another leader got a couple extra recognitions this weekend, and one of them was the C. Alvin Kamara finally getting that captain C on his uniform, and it was something that Rizzy decided that he needed to have, that he'd been a leader for this team, and heck, the way he's been playing through injury and standing up there every single weekend. I mean, he's always somebody that's going to talk after the game, win or lose, and you got to respect that, and I think that it went over very well when the team found out that he was getting that C. And Alvin appreciated it as well.
And first thing he does post-game as team captain, takes accountability for dropping that touchdown pass.
Yeah.
That would have basically iced the game, and said, look, I messed up. It's probably the lamest play I've ever made in football in my life. But, that's one of those things that, because Alvin is a guy who has preached accountability in the locker room. And it doesn't work if you're just talking about the next guy. It's got to be you who assumes that accountability. And I think Darren Rizzy said that, he's practiced that way. He's played that way. So why not put the C on his chest? And again, he had another productive day. He had more than 100 yards from scrimmage, and he sets the franchise all-time rushing record.
Right.
But,
there's that.
You still have to have that guy who's accountable to everyone, not just talk it when it's somebody else who's messing up and you've got 180 yards from scrimmage. But it's got to be when you have the mistake that you got to be able to step up in front of your teammates and say, hey, guys, on that play, I let you down. I'll make it up to you, and I appreciate you guys bailing me out, because the defense did bail him out on that one, thank goodness, because those are the situations that they have not been bailing out this offense this season. But to be able to stand up after the game, as big a game as it was, to not forget, hey, one of the biggest plays of the game, I messed up a little bit, and I need to make up for that, but I'm glad to have the record.
I think that if you throw that ball again, Alvin Kamara will catch it. I don't think we'll ever see that happen in a game. And he was very hard on himself afterwards. You could tell how upset he was after missing that ball. But this is what Alvin had to say after the game about getting that all-time rushing record.
It means a lot, and I was just telling everybody, Rizzy gave me the ball, the game ball, and just kind of announced that in the locker room. And I just told everybody, speech. So I told everybody, I'm not one to really celebrate too many of my successes. I just keep moving, and keep my head down. But this one is special. It is special. It make me feel old. 1, 2. It just make me realize, how much ball I played, and how many people had a hand in helping me get here. So just definitely appreciative to my teammates, to the city. It's special to be able to come, be able to do it in New Orleans, do it in one city. It's amazing. So I'm going to cherish that one.
Alvin now over 6,500, which is where Mark Ingram sat heading into the game yesterday. Kamara's he's got games to go. I mean, he's going to add on to that.
Well,
and
he signed a 2-year extension, so we know there's going to be a lot more yards in production. He's already the all-time leader in, so rushing yards, yards from scrimmage, all-purpose yards, rushing touchdowns, and total touchdowns. So he's already got the 5 major categories right there that you can have besides being a quarterback. The only thing he won't have is the reception record. He won't have, receiving touchdowns or receptions or receiving yards. But everything a running back can have, every record that a running back can have in franchise history, he owns. So that is something that really is remarkable, because when Alvin came as a third-round pick, I think Mark Ingram II said it. Alvin wasn't necessarily a feature back. He was kind of more of a change-of-pace guy. And in fact, when Alvin was drafted, the team had Mark Ingram, and it also had Adrian Peterson on the roster. And Alvin played so well, and Mark played so well, that Adrian Peterson was released, I think maybe a few games into the season before the team went to London to play a game. Adrian Peterson was released. Then it becomes Mark and Alvin, and they played well enough that both of those guys go to the Pro Bowl, the first time Pro Bowl running back teammates since 1975, and really started a remarkable run. Now, did I see Alvin having the endurance and the durability to get to 6,500 yards and to be the franchise all-time leader in rushing yards? I don't know if I necessarily saw that, because, again, he wasn't an every down back. He wasn't the bell cow. But, man, he has really worked at it, and that was one of the things that even back then his running backs coach was Joel Thomas. And Joel Thomas said, one of the things we find out about him that we didn't know was that he will stick his nose into the briar patch. And Alvin has continually done that. When he's needed to run between the tackles, he's run between the tackles. When they tried to get him out wide, he's done that too. So he's been every bit he's been more than you could have ever imagined, I think, for a third-round running back. I mean, he's been great value for the franchise.
Absolutely, and still very, very fun to watch, very effective. Somebody that was fun to watch on Sunday was Valdez-Scantling. It is such a nice I don't know, surprise or pleasant surprise that he came in and was more than impactful with some of those deep balls from Derek Carr. And Darren Rizzy said that he challenged MVS this week to be the leader, to kind of take over the wide receiver room, because it is very different than what it was at the beginning of the season.
He's the only guy in there with some NFL experience, number one. But number two, I mean, he said it after the game himself. Sometimes it's players being in the right situation at the right time. He was probably in a pretty decent situation in Green Bay. He gets out of there, and then it wasn't not such a great situation in Buffalo. And then he finds a team that needs him. And you see a guy have a game like that yesterday, and you're like, why in the world was he not on somebody's roster?
Yeah.
But a lot of it has to do with timing and personnel and all these things that factor into a guy being on a roster. And you see why he can be such a valuable commodity. He's big, he's 6'4", and he can run. And he can run fast. And he had, his 40-yard touchdown, at the end of it, he's basically, triple covered, but the safety had his hips flipped the wrong way. And I don't know if Derek Carr saw it, and I don't know if MVS saw it. Doesn't matter who saw it. He just saw MVS running, and he felt like he had the momentum to get to it before the defense, and he throws it out there, and Marquez actually, ends up turning around to catch it. He ran that fast. So he's a guy who desperately needed by this franchise at this moment, because when you lose a Rashid Shaheed, you lose that deep threat. And the Saints have been struggling, stretching the field for the last, month? And so you finally get in a guy who opponents have to look at film now and say, okay, we gotta watch out for 10, because 10 can run by our people.
Yeah.
And so now you have to account for him, whereas I think before, maybe last week, week before, they probably weren't thinking that. But now you have to account for a guy who run that fast and get behind your defense.
And then it helps your run game too, because players are going to play back a little bit more, so it makes life easier for Alvin Kamara. We saw one of those screen passes that worked extremely well in the game. So I think it is a great element to have back in this offense. Overall, though, there just seemed like a different energy in the game. We saw it all week. The players seemed like they had, I don't know when I say like new life, but a fresh start. And that's what they went into this week with. Rizzy said that we're just going to go 1-0, forget the losing streak, forget everything that's happened. But to see it actually translate on the field as well, the way that they played, the passion that they played with, and then the ability to finish, it was just overall a great day, I think.
Well, you know what? I don't think you're overplaying it when you say new life. I mean, they looked energized.
Yeah.
They looked kind of reborn. I mean, when you lose 7 straight, and I can't say this enough, you lose 7 straight, it's hard on everybody. And there's going to be a change, probably. There aren't many franchises or many teams that can weather a 7-game losing streak in an NFL season and not make any changes. And so, if you want to make a big change on an NFL team, there's only 2 people that you can change to really make an impact. That's either the quarterback or the head coach. Well, the quarterback's here, and the head coach, bears the brunt of it generally, because that's where the buck stops. So you change the head coach. Coach Rizzy comes in, and he doesn't make massive overhaul changes because you can't. You're 9 games into the season. You had a whole offseason program that you implemented, a whole new offense that you implemented, and a defensive scheme that's been in play for the last, almost decade here. So there's only so much you can do. But the small things that he could tweak, changing around the seating in the locker room, team meetings, having guys sit next to somebody else. He's talked about getting back to the fundamentals on the defensive line with hand placement and those kinds of things. Small things can add up, especially when guys are a little bit more attentive to it. And I think they were a lot more attentive to it last week after Coach Allen was fired, because they're thinking, one, there is a guilt factor that goes along with that. And you've heard those guys say, 15, 20, 30 times, everybody in the building had a hand in this. So there's a guilt factor involved with that. And then you want to say, okay, we're better players than this. And we have a chance to prove it with this fresh start. We've got a new chance. We can wipe everything off the ledger. I understand, we're 2-7. But from here on, this is an 8-game season. How much can we win? How much can we improve? How effective can we be?
Well, it was a good start. And I don't know if anybody had any more energy than Darren Rizzy himself. He was a wild man.
I thought a blood vessel was going to pop in his face. I mean, he really scrunched it up and twisted it around a few times. Looked like the Exorcist got a hold of him or something. But I mean, it was, now a lot of people say, well, that kind of emotion's been missing. And look, those guys people are different, and they display emotions, different ways.
Yeah. If
you win the game, that's fantastic emotion. If you don't win the game, people are, it doesn't take all that. So, hey, won the game, it was positive. But, I think players did feed into it somewhat. Mm-hmm. Obviously on Sunday, I thought they played with a level of energy that, and not to say it had been lacking, but you need to see some results. And they were seeing results through, especially through the first half, but they saw enough results to where they felt like, what? Hey, this is working. It's working. And then you get to the end and you finish it with the defense on the field after the defense had been on the field for the Philadelphia game, hadn't gotten it done. On the field for the first Atlanta game, didn't get it done. On the field at the end, Kansas City weren't able to get it done. Several games where the Saints defense was on the field and unable to get a stop or a turnover or block a field goal, anything to finish out the game. So to be the unit on the field to finish out that game against the Falcons yesterday had to feel good. And then you see that and it happens, and now you turn around, you look at the coach and you're like, you know what? You were right.
Yeah.
You were right. We can do this. The things you did, no matter how small, maybe it was, maybe I do need to sit next to the long snapper in practice. I mean, in team meetings, maybe that helped. But now everything is a buy-in because you see results on the field.
So Rizzy said this today. The biggest challenge is sustaining that energy going into this week. How do you do that?
Well, that's the question. That's the question. And and I think I asked him, okay, how many more changes can you implement to keep things new? And I mean, I'm sure he's got some more tricks up his sleeve, but ultimately, adrenaline is going to taper off.
Yeah.
You can't operate off adrenaline indefinitely. So now it's going to come down to execution. And so, if we want to say the first half against Atlanta was enthusiasm and adrenaline, that was a 17-7 half. The second half, where they punt 5 times, is, now the adrenaline's going off. Now you got to be able to execute.
Right.
And of course, the Falcons come out and they make adjustments, but you have to be able to execute what you want to do, even though the opponent is able to make adjustments. So that's where we're going to find out a little bit more about the Saints in this second game against Cleveland this coming Sunday is, okay, you can't just operate off adrenaline. It has to be execution. Now can you buckle down and execute for the entirety of the game?
I was impressed, though, after that first offensive drive, the first play that Derek Carr had, goes to Taysom Hill. Hill runs it down the field for a touchdown, and it gets called back because of a Foster Moreau holding penalty. Then you get back down again into the red zone, about to score. You go for it on 4-2 from the 6 and don't get it. And the team kept fighting. Yeah, I think they were cool with that call. They liked the aggressive nature of it, and they didn't get down, even though 2 different things didn't go their way.
He sent a message to the team, and the message to the team is, we're playing to win. We're not playing conservative. We're playing to win. You're early in the game. It's a scoreless game, and of course you want points. But Darren Rizzy was saying to his team, we want touchdowns. We're not going to settle for field goals. Now, there comes a point in time where you got to kick field goals sometime. They kicked 2 of them yesterday. Mm-hmm. But he's saying early in the game, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to keep our foot on the accelerator. And yeah, those guys responded to it because they're saying, look, we're playing to win. We're not being conservative here. We're not being the team that's going to receive the blow. We're going to deliver the hit, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may.
And the fans seemed like they were cool with that call too.
Yeah, they were fine with it. I mean, I think they appreciated seeing the Saints line up, because I mean, again, when you see the team line up like in that situation, they're saying, look, we're playing to win, y'all. We ain't playing, we didn't do all this work to go down and kick a field goal. Mm-hmm. We're playing to win. And you're going to have more situations like that where, it's going to be 4th and 2 at the 7 or whatever, and you're going to be down, 5 instead of, scoreless game where you need to execute and get that. So it's good to get it in, and you hopefully execute better the next time. But, all's well that ends well because you win the game yesterday.
The fans absolutely showed out yesterday. I was a little surprised. You are going in a 7-game losing streak. Things have not been going well. And the fans absolutely showed up, and they were loud.
Well, one, it's Atlanta. It's Atlanta. So factor that in because, Saints fans and Saints players dislike Atlanta. So there was probably going to be a pretty good crowd. And the best thing that happened is the Saints scored early, even though they didn't get the fourth down and they didn't convert there, but they do kick a field goal, and then they get the long touchdown to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So that helps to keep the fans involved because it's one of those where you can have the fans in there, but if Atlanta jumps to a 10-0 lead or 7-0 lead, then it can kind of deflate the place. But again, there's enough dislike for the Falcons that it was going to carry the day. And it's one of those where, you kind of wondered, will Saints fans, give up their tickets today? Will they go to the game? But then you got to remember, it's the Falcons, and they really, really, really dislike the Falcons. Now, you don't dislike the fans because, fans are fans. They do what they do, and, they come and everybody comes to town and say, we took over Bourbon Street, blah, 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 blah. But the team that came in is one that has been the deepest rival for the Saints since the inception of the Saints and the inception of the Falcons. They came into the NFL at the same time. So they don't like each other. The proximity demands that they not like each other. And so, they're going to, if there's no other game Saints fans are going to show up for, it's going to be that one. If the Saints, heaven forbid this ever happens, but the Saints went 2-15, but beat the Falcons twice, Saints fans be like, well, you know what? Wasn't a good season, but boy, we got the Falcons. So it's one of those where, if the Falcons went on to win the Super Bowl and the Saints went 2-15 and beat the Falcons twice, the Saints fans will be like, yeah, you won the Super Bowl, but you couldn't beat us.
Right.
We're the Super Bowl champs of the Falcons. So it's one of those things. There's that kind of dislike.
This week, you get the win, but there are a couple things that you can look to that need to be cleaned up. And again, it was the penalties, the explosive plays that the defense allowed, the rush game, the run defense wasn't the best. These are some of the things we've been saying all season.
Yeah.
So,
the run game D has to be, and the run game D started well on Sunday, and then it just got progressively leakier as the game went on, and that's something that's going to have to be rectified. When you give up that many rushing yards, and what was it, 190, something like it? It's hard to win. It's hard to win. So that's got to be fixed. The penalties, especially the ones in the defensive backfield, and unfortunately, Alante Taylor did not have his best game. Had a couple of DPIs and had a defensive hold, and it's one of those things. Those are the things that have to be cleaned up because those are the things that easily on Sunday could have prevented this team from winning. You add all that up, and the Saints, well, they had to play clean. They couldn't turn it over. They had to had to be able to convert on in the red zone, and they had to have the Falcons special teams really, really just botch it up with 1 of 4 field goals. So they needed those things in order to overcome the things that they did to themselves. Now, what happens when the opponent is 3 or 4 from field goal range?
Yeah.
And what happens when the opponent is able to cash in a little bit better in the red zone? Well, you need to be cleaner yourself because not every game is going to be as clean for the Saints as it was yesterday in terms of no turnovers and no sacks. There's going to be some games where Derek Carr might take 3 sacks. There might be some games where he might, have an interception. There might be some games where he only completes, 50% of his passes. So you got to be a little bit more clean defensively to help offset some of that. And then you got to be better offensively too because this team can be better offensively. We've seen it be better offensively and started really well. I think Alvin Kamara had 37 rushing yards in the first quarter, ended up with 55. So
yeah,
it's one of those things where, okay, cool, but let's press the issue here and let's be more effective and more efficient as we go along.
Yeah, it did seem like the run game started to go away as the game went on. They still tried to, hit some of those deep balls, obviously Alvin in that last one. But yeah, you got to keep things multiple, be balanced, I think would be the most effective way to do this. It was really good, though, to see Cam Jordan and Peyton Turner out there making plays on the defensive side, because it's been rough going for both of those players this year. For Cam Jordan, being in and out, he had the lowest snap count against the Panthers, back up to 40 this past week. And then Peyton Turner has just been dealing with so many issues on and off the field as far as injuries.
Yeah, good to see Peyton Turner be productive. He got a big time sack. And Cam, I think that was his 24th sack against the Falcons. And if I'm mistaken, it's because Cam misled me, because he said 24, and Cam keeps up with these kinds of things against the Falcons. So I'm sure he was correct. But it was good to see him be productive. Most of the time, it's hard to get any rhythm going when you play 10 snaps or 15 snaps or 20 snaps as a defensive lineman. It's just difficult to do, because you need enough snaps out there to set up the offensive lineman. You need to be able to say, okay, I've got him, leaning left so I can get right on him, or I got him on his heel so I can power rush him. You need to be able to have enough snaps to get into rhythm to be able to do that. And if you're only playing 10, 15 snaps, that's going to be just about impossible, because you're playing so sporadic. You can't set him up. You cannot set him up in that amount of time. So it was good for Cam to get into a rhythm, get out there. And Rizzy said, it wasn't just the flash play. It wasn't just the sack. It was the entirety of what he was able to do that made it his best game of the season, Cam Jordan, that is. And so, this is a Cam Jordan that's hopefully energized down the stretch. That was his first sack of the season. And Cam Jordan, already the all-time franchise leader in sacks. But, the last couple of seasons, we have not seen that rush from him getting to the quarterback that we're accustomed to seeing. Hurries are nice and great, but look, defensive linemen want sacks. The team needs those sacks from those defensive linemen, because if you get them from the defensive linemen, you don't have to blitz linebackers, you don't have to blitz your slots, you don't have to blitz your corners. You can get home with the front four, and you can play a little safer in the back. So hopefully this is the beginning down the stretch of something real good, because, Chase Young got one too.
Yep.
So you get 3 off the defensive line, and if you can get that kind of production off the defensive line, you can have a really effective pass defense.
And 2 of them were strip sacks. You could have gotten the ball too, but neither of them recovered.
Yeah, Chase's was just, the offensive lineman got to it, but Peyton's was kind of laying there for the taking, and you just couldn't get to it.
Well, those are all great things that happened in yesterday's game. A couple things that, do need to be cleaned up, but it is so good to be back in the win column. It's been a fun past week, and I really just kind of hope they keep it rolling, because we got the Cleveland Browns coming into town and a quarterback that we're quite familiar with.
Well, it's always great to be cleaning up in wins, and now Jameis comes to town, and we know Jameis is the definition. If you look up gunslinger in the dictionary, that is Jameis Winston's picture there. So we know he's going to be out for vengeance or whatever you want to call it. He's going to be chucking it around the field, and he's got a great arm. But we also know that Jameis can have some decisions that aren't the best, and so hopefully the Saints are able to take advantage of those when he does have those, because it has happened before when he played with Tampa Bay against the Saints. And for the Saints, hopefully it'll happen on Sunday when he plays for the Browns. But it's going to be interesting to see, because Saints fans, have this romanticism about Jameis that man, if Jameis was just here, he should have been QB1. Look, y'all, there's a reason. Winston
is very hot and very cold.
Yeah,
at times.
There's a reason Jameis has been around several franchises, and it ain't because he's been hot. So we'll see what happens there. But the Saints have to know defensively, because these guys, a lot of them worked against Jameis. They know his tendencies, so they know he is capable of putting a few up for grabs. Hopefully, he puts a few up for grabs on Sunday.
Yeah, it's going to be a good matchup, and I'm sure there will be lots of chatter back and forth about it, because we know Jameis Winston likes to talk as well. But man, I'm just glad that we got a win, JD.
Yeah, it's good to be able to exhale. seven straight. That's essentially 2 months, and that's a long time between W's in the NFL. That's a long 2 months for any franchise, and I know this franchise. You can't exhale and feel like you got it all figured out, because you don't. But, man, it feels good to be trying to figure it out after a win instead of another loss.
Definitely helps build some confidence here for the players, the fan base going forward. And the next one is going to be Sunday against the Cleveland Browns here in New Orleans at the Superdome. So again, fans, show up, show out, and be loud just like you were this past Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. Thank you, JD.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.